Hello! In this video I will show you how to do a password recovery on Cisco router, and I will do that in Cisco Packet Tracer. Okay, so let's start right away, and let's start by configuring this router, but first maybe let's connect it to the switch. So let's use the gigabit Ethernet 0/0, let's connect it to this port, and now let's do a very simple configuration on the router. So let's go inside, let's set the host name, let's say to router 1. Now let's configure the interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0. Let's give it an IP address. Let's say this one. And let's do the no shutdown. So now you will see that the connection is up. The connection is up. We can exit this configuration and we can give the router some password. So let's do the enable secret command. And let's type in something difficult and long so I make sure I don't remember this password. So we have the password, we can exit again. And now let's look into the show running config. And here, as you can see, there is this command I just used, enable secret, and there is the encrypted password. So when we use enable secret command, the password is encrypted using the MD5 hash. So now the password is set. I don't remember the password, so what do we do now? Before we do the password recovery, I just want to show you the show version command. As you probably know, this command will show you general information about the router, for example the iOS software and so on. But if you scroll down at the very bottom, there is something called configuration register, and configuration register at the moment is set to 0x2102. And here I would like to slow down for a moment and actually explain to you what is actually configuration register. If you want to skip this part and just see how to do the password recovery, then feel free to do that. But also I think it's really interesting and important that we know what we're doing and that we know what we're using. So let's just quickly introduce you and explain the configuration register in general. Configuration register is a special 16-bit value that can be used to change router behavior when it comes to booting. The router will look into the configuration register during boot up in order to find and load the iOS image. If the router cannot find the system image, it will load into the ROM monitor, also called ROMON. ROM stands for read-only memory. And that's what we want to do. We want to boot into ROMON so that we can manipulate the configuration register and recover the password. As you can see on cisco.com, there are multiple different configuration registers listed that we could use, but basically there are only 3 of them that will be interesting for us. So the first one, 0x2102, so this is the default one, it ignores break and it boots into ROM if initial boot fails. Then the second one, 0x2120, it boots into ROMON, and this one we could set in privileged exec mode to boot into ROMON directly, but if we forgot the password, we cannot go to the privileged exec mode in the first place, right? So we cannot set it. So that's why the most important and the most interesting for us will be this one, 0x2142. This one will ignore the contents of NVRAM, which I will explain later soon what is this, but first let's look at the configuration register itself. On the screen right now you can see an example of 0x2142 configuration register. And as I mentioned, a configuration register is a 16-bit value. Each bit is a flag used for some reason. It can be either turned on or turned off, and each flag controls a specific behavior. For example, if bit 13 is turned on, then the router knows that it should boot the ROMON in case if boot fails. Each bit has its purpose, and the most important bit for password recovery is bit number 6, which tells the router to ignore the content of NVRAM. NVRAM stands for non-volatile random access memory, and it is the opposite of RAM, random access memory. NVRAM is what is persistent across the reboot, so it contains our startup configuration, in which the password is configured. So when we do that and then we reset the router, we don't have to use the password anymore because simply the configuration with the password set is not there at the moment. So when the bit number 6 is set to 1, in binary it looks like 0100, which equals to 4. That's why we have the 4 in the middle of 0x2142. Okay, so let's do the password recovery. Let's bring the laptop and let's connect it to the router using a console cable. Now we have to go into the router and we have to switch it off and switch it on again so it can reset. We go back to the laptop, to terminal, and we do the control break, so we are in the ROM-on. Now we type in the command confreg 0x2142 and we can reset the router. So now it will ignore the non-volatile random access memory and VRAM as I told you before, and we have to wait a moment. So now we type no and we're in. Now we have to restore the previous configuration, so we do copy start run, and now we can enable secret again, so we overwrite the password to a new one. Now, before we do anything else, let's look into the show version again. So this is also very important. The configuration register is still 0x2142, so we have to change it. We do the command config register 0x2102. And now we do the show version again. And as you can see, it will be 0x2102 at next reload. We copy the configuration as usually, and we do the reload. Okay, so we have to wait a bit until it will reload. And then we will be able to log in again without a password. Oh, there's a password here to type in. Why is there a password now here? Because we of course overwritten the password to the Cisco. And as you can see in show version command, the configuration register is set to 0x2102 again. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video, if you found it helpful. Write a comment if you can, and give me a like or dislike, whatever you feel. Thank you so much.